The Philadelphia Eagles had an extremely successful 2022 season as they were on their way to a 14-3 regular season and a trip to Super Bowl 57. Unfortunately, the Super Bowl didn't go according to plan, but I think we would all be surprised if the Eagles don't make it back there at least once in the next couple of years. Their roster is extremely talented, and outside of a few positions, they are relatively young and they will be around for a long time. General Manager Howie Roseman has done a tremendous job at building this roster and preparing for the inevitable departures of longtime players when that time comes. The Eagles were a team nobody wanted to play last year because not only did they win most of the time, but they more often than not kicked your ass in the process, as they had 32 rushing touchdowns as a team, which of course led the NFL. Throughout the 2022 season, both regular season and postseason included, they rushed for 200 yards or more 5 times, and in those games, averaged a staggering 38.6 points per game. But how will they do in 2023? Well, we're going to break everything down in today's video, and without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing what the Eagles' strengths are offensively heading into the year, and well, that's everything. Jalen Hurts is a very good quarterback and finished the 2022 season second in the MVP award race, finishing behind Patrick Mahomes of the Chiefs, who would go on to throw for 5,000 yards for the second time in his career and throw for over 40 touchdowns. Hurts, on the other hand, would have 35 total touchdowns, including 13 rushing, and amassed over 4,400 yards of total offense. Jalen elevated his game in a big way in 2022, and that's a tribute to his work ethic and everyone in the organization doing their job at a high level. From Jalen making plays to the offensive line collectively being one of, if not the best units in the league, and of course the receiving duo in A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. And we can't forget tight end Dallas Goedert either. Because Hurts had such a good year last year and will turn just 25 in August, he was compensated with a very large contract this offseason, which will keep him in Philly for the next 5 years. Based on the year Jalen had last year, it's not unrealistic to think he'll have a 35 or 40 touchdown season this year if he plays all 17 games, and that the Eagles have back-to-back years of not just double-digit wins, but 12-plus win seasons. The first 5 games of Philly's schedules are very favorable for them, as they play in New England, then come home and play Minnesota on Thursday night, then go to Tampa, then play the Commanders at home, and then go to LA to play the Rams. And sure, they could drop one of these games like we saw last year when the Commanders beat them on Monday Night Football at the Link, but I do seriously think this team will start 5-0. That's also not to say these games are going to be easy, as no NFL game is easy, but with the Eagles able to play to whichever strength they want to offensively, they are a nightmare to play. And not only that, but their defense is going to be elite this year, which we will of course get into later in the video. I would be surprised if the Patriots put up more than 20 points against this stout Eagles defense, and if you tell Jalen and the offense heading into any game that 20 points will more than likely get you a win, well, I'm going to trust they put up 20 against anybody. I think week 2 against the Vikings will be a game similar to last year when these teams played, where the Eagles dominate the game in the trenches and come away with a win. I don't think the Bucs are going to be a great team this year, and with pressure, which they will have no problem generating, I think they will comfortably beat Baker Mayfield and the Bucs. Washington is truly a wild card, but after the loss they suffered last year to this same Commanders team, I think they'll want to get revenge, and it'll be close, don't get me wrong, but I do think Philly comes out on top at home. I don't think the Rams have the depth to seriously compete this year, and to summarize this up, 5-0 is completely reasonable for the Eagles, and we're not going to discuss every game like this, but starting out hot is going to be critical, because if you thought the schedule seemed somewhat easy for a team that just went to the Super Bowl and are wondering if the schedule will get more difficult as the season progresses, well, you'd be right. The Eagles started out the 2022 season with an 8-0 record, and everyone was chasing them, and I have a feeling it'll be the same way this year. There is some concern with the Eagles running backs, but this isn't something I'm worried about at all, because it's very much a plug-and-play situation. Miles Sanders rushed for nearly 1,300 yards last year, along with 11 touchdowns, and that's very good production for any back, let alone Miles Sanders. But it's kind of a consensus that Miles is not an elite running back, as in top 2 or top 3 by any means either. They traded for former Lions running back DeAndre Swift this offseason, and also brought in Rashad Penny from the Seahawks, along with Kenneth Gainwell and fan favorite and Giants killer Boston Scott coming back too. So outside of Jalen Hurts being a threat in the run game, the Eagles have 4 backs that can step in any given week and carry the load. And there's a couple of things that benefit any Eagles running back. Number 1, of course, is having a great offensive line and the natural push those guys will generate up front. But the other is having Jalen Hurts as your quarterback who can throw for 300 yards in any game, which he did 4 times last year, and also having the defense have to account for both Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. And if that's not enough, they also have to factor in Dallas Goedert too. So what I envision the Eagles doing this year from a running back perspective is to have a committee and keep all of the guys fresh, because they have a luxury a lot of other teams do not have. They can have Kenneth Gainwell play most of the first quarter and keep DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny fresh for the second half to truly wear teams down late in the game. And these kind of things are going to matter late in the season. Players, of course, are going to get hurt throughout the season, and injury is a part of the game. But managing running back workloads is a way to prevent the hits they take and to ultimately keep them out of harm's way. Miles Sanders had 259 carries last year, and I would be pretty surprised if Swift has that many carries this year. And from a receiving standpoint, we already know they have 2 good receivers and 2 guys who could walk into a lot of other NFL locker rooms and be the number 1 receiver for a team, and those guys are, of course, Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. And in 2022, each player went for over 1,000 yards, with Devonta going for 1,196 and A.J. going for 1,496, so they were 12 feet apart, meaning 4 yards, from each guy having a 1,500 yard and a 1,200 yard year in the same offense. I think the preview for the 2023 season for the Eagles' top 2 receivers is pretty simple. If they stay healthy, they're each going to go for 1,000 yards for the second consecutive year, and it may feel like A.J. Brown is an old veteran player because it seems like he's been around for a while, but A.J. is only about a year and a half older than Devonta, and he's only 26. So a big reason why I like the Eagles' future so much is because they have a quarterback and 2 top receivers that, in theory, should all be around for the next 5 years. Dallas Goedert is only 28 years old, and I think Goedert, in terms of talent, is a very good tight end, but is a classic case of a player who is better than what the stat sheet shows. I definitely think Dallas could go be a more productive tight end in a less loaded offense, but he is a very good player and a guy both Eagles fans and players love. This could be the last year for both center Jason Kelce and right tackle Lane Johnson, as Lane is 33 years old. Kelce will turn 36 during the season and has mulled retirement over the past 2 years, so there is a good chance that 2023 is in fact his final year. This obviously isn't news to anyone that follows the Eagles, and they even prepared for this by drafting Cam Jurgens in the second round of the 2022 draft. And Cam is going to be the right guard for the Eagles this year. Overall, from an offensive perspective, assuming they stay healthy, of course, because you kind of have to do that when doing team previews, they are a top 3 offense, really at minimum on paper heading into the year. And when you have a player that finished second in MVP voting just 1 year ago lead the team, along with 2 very, very good receivers and a very good offensive line, it's not hard to project the absolute best for the 2023 Philadelphia Eagles. And it's not like they're a one-trick pony either, where if you can hold the offense down, you have a good shot of beating them. Their defense will probably be amongst the best in the NFL, and this is after a year in which they finished 8th in points per game allowed and finished 2nd in yards allowed per game. They are a very good unit, and it starts up front. They will feel the loss of defensive tackle Javon Hargrave, but it's not the end of the world for them, which is crazy to say. They had 4 players finish with double-digit most sacks last year, with Hargrave being one of them, but replaced him with one of the best defensive tackle prospects we've seen in the past 10 years in Jalen Carter. And Jalen can be a pretty controversial figure due to everything off the field, which is an entirely different conversation. But speaking from the force we see on the field, Jalen is going to be a game wrecker at the NFL level. And admittedly, I don't think he's going to have 11 sacks or 57 pressures in 2023 like Javon Hargrave did last year, because that would be a legendary rookie season from a defensive tackle. But over the next few years, no pun intended because of where he went to college, but he's going to be a dog. And I think his current teammate and former Georgia teammate Jordan Davis is one of the best kept secrets in all of the NFL, because there's not a lot of buzz on him heading into the season. Having a defensive line consist of Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis, and Jalen Carter is something defensive line coaches dream of, and it's not like the defense stops there. They have Haason Reddick coming off the edge, who finished 2022 with a career-high 68 pressures and 16 sacks, and also had 5 forced fumbles. Oh, and we're still not done with how good their defensive line is, because they have Josh Sweat, who had 11 sacks last year, and they drafted Georgia pass rusher Nolan Smith in the first round. And if you weren't aware of how much of a physical specimen Nolan Smith is, well, he's 6'2", 240 pounds, and ran a 4.39 40 and jumped 41.5 inches in the vertical. And he gets to play with the same guys from college that won back-to-back national championships, and he gets to learn from Haason Reddick, who was just in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. My outlook on the 2023 Eagles is obviously going to be very, very bright, and for good reason. And if you told me this team would go on to win the Super Bowl this year, I would not be surprised at all. But for a team that's already very good, this is a rare scenario where the future, as in 2024 and beyond, looks even better for them, and they could still win it all this year. And hell, they nearly did last year. I know people get annoyed with how much the Eagles are hyped up and talked about, but it's for good reason. The only weakness on their roster is they don't have a great running back, and if anything has been proven over the past decade, it's that you don't need a great running back to win the Super Bowl. And one player I think breaks out in a big way this year is second-year linebacker Nakobe Dean. I love Nakobe coming out of Georgia, and he's going to be playing behind his boys in Jordan and Jalen, and everything is there for him to be the stud linebacker in the middle of this defense. With Darius Slay and James Bradbury aging, I do worry about them a little bit, because James will turn 30 in August and Darius will turn 33 in January, so there is some cause for concern if they start to slip, but again, a good pass rush can shield a lot of problems. And that to me is the biggest concern with the Eagles defense, is older corners. It is worth noting they picked up Greedy Williams in free agency, who is looking to turn his career around, and Keely Ringo in the 4th round, who I thought was a very good value pick that late in the draft. And the same applies to rookie 3rd rounder Sidney Brown from Illinois. There are not a lot of weaknesses on this roster, and they're going to win a lot of games simply by having more talent than other teams. They won't go 17-0, don't get me wrong, but they are in line to win anywhere from 12 games or more. The most important stretch for this team is going to be coming off the bye, in which they play 6 straight teams that made the playoffs last year, including a Monday night game against the Chiefs. The team MVP, breakout players, ceiling, and floor are on the screen, and I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as each only take a second to do and make a massive difference. Only about 32% of people watching are subscribed, so if you enjoy, please help with the channel's growth as we close in on 80K. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.